Former special counsel Robert Mueller is defending his investigation and pushing back on criticism from a member of his team. Mueller released a rare statement yesterday, writing, quote, "It is not surprising that members of the special counsel's office did not always agree, but it is disappointing to hear criticism of our team based on incomplete information." He went on to say that he stands by the decision made and the conclusions of our investigation. So he's speaking directly to former top prosecutor Andrew Weissmann and his new book, Where Law Ends, Inside the Mueller Investigation. Now, Weissmann details where he thinks the report succeeded and where it failed to meet expectations. And he is joining us now. So I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us. You actually had a lot of praise for special counsel Mueller in your book, but you were not shy about critiquing him as well. How do you respond to Mueller's response to your assertions?
So one of the things that I tried to do was be really candid with the American public and for history in terms of where I thought we rose to the challenge and where I thought we could do better. It would have been a very easy book to write only about the onslaught from the White House and from Attorney General Barr, and I certainly do cover that in the book. But I thought it was also necessary to look at our own conduct to figure out what we could have done better, and certainly give praise to the things that we did, to the agents and analysts who were amazing. But I don't think it is particularly helpful to just gloss over things that I think we could have done better. And that includes, most notably, I think that eventually we really needed to do a full financial investigation of the president. I think we should have subpoenaed the president. And I think we should have come out with a conclusion about whether he obstructed justice or not, to give 3 examples. And I go into that in the book and explain my reasoning. And these are just, respectfully, these are disagreements. But obviously the special counsel is the boss, and he made those decisions.
You know, it's an excellent point that you make, Mr. Weissmann, because, you know, your critique in the book is that you were not able to come to this conclusion on obstruction of justice, despite the evidence that you uncovered. And I've seen some commentary, I guess, written about Director Mueller that suggests that, you know, he's sort of from a bygone era in Washington, D.C., in that he's sort of ramrod straight, respectful of the chain of command, respectful of the executive branch and the judiciary, as well as the legislative, and playing by sort of rules that have been upended by the presidency of Donald Trump. Is that how you see it, or was there something else?
I think Robert Mueller is always motivated by doing the right thing as he sees it. But the reason I think that not coming to a conclusion with respect to obstruction of justice was wrong was that under the special counsel rules that we operated under, we were writing a report, an internal report going to the Attorney General. And those guidelines, the special counsel rules, required us to make a recommendation as to what we found. It was the Attorney General's decision as to whether that report would be made public or not. So I actually think it would have been staying in our lane more and playing by the rules more to adhere to the special counsel rules and make the recommendation to the Attorney General, and then let the Attorney General decide what should happen with respect to our conclusions.
Right. So just before Anne-Marie jumps in, I just want to clarify that. Does that mean then, am I to take it that perhaps, again, sort of in the thrust of the question I asked you, did Director Mueller have too much faith in the Attorney General and in William Barr specifically?
There's no question that we all thought that the Attorney General, who was just recently appointed, that we thought he would be an institutionalist and that he would be upholding the independence of the Department of Justice. And my book starts with a moment where we realized that was not true, which is March 24th, 2019, when he issued his 4-page letter that purported to be a summary of our report, but was anything but a summary. So the straight, direct answer to your question is yes, we had faith in him upholding the rule of law. And that, in many ways, is why my book is called Where Law Ends, because that is one of the things that we've now seen repeatedly under this Attorney General.
The president was not subpoenaed. And so I have sort of a couple questions about the approach to the president that kind of springboards off of what Vlad said. Do you think that the president should have been subpoenaed? And also, in light of the recent revelations in the New York Times reporting on his tax returns, do you think the investigation should have pushed harder to get access to those tax returns?
Yes and yes, to give you direct answers. With respect to subpoenaing the president, first, I want to make it clear that Special Counsel Mueller bent over backwards to try to accommodate the White House, and that's laid out in our report. But ultimately, I think by not subpoenaing the president, we set a very poor precedent for the next time, God forbid, it needs to be an investigation of the White House, where someone's going to be able to look back and say, see, you can do this investigation without actually hearing from the president. I thought it was important to hear from the president himself, to ask follow-up questions. And with respect to the financial investigation, we now see from the New York Times what it is that we passed up by not doing that financial investigation. A lot of the American public is not only seeing for the first time what information there is about the president's finances, but they have a lot of additional questions. I mean, the big question is, with respect to the $420 million, who does he owe that money to? And from a counterintelligence perspective, if that is foreign people or foreign governments that he owes money to, that is something that we really need to understand.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Weissmann, have you been subpoenaed by John Durham, or are you expected to answer any questions into that ongoing probe?
I have not been subpoenaed, and I don't anticipate it. But I'm happy to give any information I have. I don't think, given what I understand he's looking at, which is the genesis of the Russian investigation, which I wasn't involved in, I don't suspect that I'm going to have particularly relevant information.
One of the aspects of your book that I thought was very interesting that you point out about this investigation, the position that you were in, is that you found yourself investigating when you have a president who could pardon some of the individuals you were investigating, but also a president who could stop the investigation at any time he wanted. And you talk about the difficulty of pursuing an investigation with those pressures.
Absolutely. So I prosecuted mob bosses in New York City. I prosecuted Enron executives. And one thing that's really different in when you spend 22 months investigating the White House is in those traditional cases, those people do not have the ability to fire you. And they also don't have the ability to thwart cooperation by dangling pardons. One of the, I think, key chapters of my book is about the way in which we eventually obtained the cooperation of Rick Gates, and it was really a tug of war between his knowing that we built an incredibly strong case against him in terms of what he had done. That was on the one side, but then there was a pressure on the other side, which none of us had ever experienced before, which was his thinking, gee, I wonder if I could just get pardoned and not have to worry about my criminality. And ultimately, it was quite interesting. A Republican lobbyist who used to work for Paul Manafort had a conversation with Rick Gates where he basically said, you can't trust this president. This was coming from a traditional Republican lobbyist saying, Rick, you really need to do what's right here and own up to what you did and don't count on the president pardoning you. And that was the last major cooperator we were able to obtain, given what we were confronting from the White House in terms of their ability to dangle pardons to thwart cooperation.
Mr. Weissmann, let me ask you another question. As you know, earlier this month, the Finance Committee Chairman, Chuck Grassley, pointed to a recent FOIA request or release from the Justice Department that shows at least 27 instances of phones that were assigned to Director Mueller's team being, quote, wiped or reset for various reasons, or passcodes being lost, at least 15 instances of passcodes being forgotten or being entered too many times. Was your phone one of the ones that were wiped and the passcodes entered incorrectly, and what happened to your phone?
So one of the things that I really wish the department would put out there was all of the ways in which we had backup systems, and so everything that might be on a phone was backed up on our computers. So I don't think we lost any data whatsoever. And in fact, one of the things that I detail in the book is, far from not wanting to keep information, we were very concerned that if we were fired, that our information would disappear. So we did everything we could to make sure that our records existed and existed in numerous locations in the Department of Justice, as well as in the court. So this is one where we had every reason to make sure everything existed for posterity.
So those records are presumably somewhere. If not on those phones, they are somewhere.
Well, in my case, I know they are because, for instance, Judicial Watch actually subpoenaed all of my calendars, and I remember having to go through 4 years of calendars. Nothing disappeared at all. And so they're quite aware that they have all of this data, and the Department of Justice should know that as well. And I'm curious as to why they're not coming forward with that information.
All right, Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Very interesting. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The book is called Where Law Ends: Inside the Mueller Investigation, and it's now available wherever books are sold.